At least if you look at the news, it seems like we have a crisis in the world while I'm shooting the breeze and talking about enlightenment and waking up and on and on. We do need to address the fact that there is a lot going on in the world right now that is easily a crisis and possibly a risk to our survival as a species, and actually possibly a risk to the survival of life on our planet. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that is causing a lot of death, a lot of suffering. We're also seeing a lot of violence in America right now and across the world. A lot of turbulence. There is panic around the financial situation of the world. There are trade wars going on, and there are bellicose and belligerent leaders worldwide trying to quote unquote win. So I think if we did not address the fact that we are in a crisis right now, globally, then we would be in denial. Whenever there is a loss of something that we take for granted, and we took our existence for granted, and we take our life for granted, and we took not only our life for granted and our existence for granted, but our lifestyle also for granted. And now that is going away. That way of living and being is slowly going away. And if it doesn't go away, by the way, then we risk our extinction. So I think it's only appropriate that we not be in denial. We recognize the fact that the world is in fear at the moment, and that there is a crisis in the world at the moment. And this crisis is severe enough that it could risk extinction of species, extinction of life, extinction of existence as we know it. And so whenever that happens, there is grief at loss. And as a physician, I've seen people go through the grieving process, sometimes very rapidly. For example, seeing a patient in the midst of a heart attack and knowing that that patient is dying. And the patient knows it too, in an emergency room. And I've been in this situation many times. So when suddenly the patient recognizes that death is imminent, what happens? The first thing is a feeling of victimization. Why me? Why me? Well, right now it's not just me. The whole world is struggling right now. It's not just me. The whole world is struggling. So the first stage of grief is victimization. The second stage is frequently anger and hostility. And then there is frustration, then there's resignation, there's helplessness, all happening within the hour in a dying patient. I can testify that as an emergency room physician or a former emergency room physician. So I saw people going through denial, victimization, anger, hostility, frustration, helplessness, resignation, and then only a few, once in a while, in the midst of death, would find acceptance. Only a few in the midst of death would find acceptance in the moment, because there's no choice. It's beyond resignation, beyond helplessness. And when I saw acceptance in the moment, I also saw peace. And some went beyond acceptance and peace, and asked, what is the meaning? What is the meaning of what is happening right now? What is the meaning? I think we need to address that, because if we don't ask ourselves what the meaning is, there's no solution, no creative solution, no spiritual solution, and no waking up. So today I'd like to address the meaning behind what is happening in our world at the moment. And I, along with some colleagues, Dr. Zach Bush, who's an internist and a very profound thinker, and has a great background in understanding microbial genetic information. So along with Dr. Zach Bush, a colleague of mine, Dr. Paul Mills, who's a professor public health at University of San Diego, Dr. Rudy Tanzi, who's my colleague and co-author in 3 books, Super Genes, Super Brain, and The Healing Self. Dr. Tanzi is a geneticist and neuroscientist at Harvard University and Mass General Hospital. And Dr. Michelle Williams, who is the Dean of Harvard School of Public Health. Together, we put out a statement which will be in major publications on Monday about what is happening in our world. And rather than risk extemporaneously, I'll read you the statement from my iPad as we have just finished editing it, and this will be out in most publications that we can reach imminently. And the statement says, nature's identity crisis and ours. And the authors are Dr. Zach Bush, Paul Mills, Dr. Paul Mills, Rudy Tanzi, Michelle Williams, and myself as the senior author. So here is a direct read of the statement. As our nation dives into sorrow and outrage over another merciless killing of a black man without cause, we must take the opportunity to transform a deep mindset. To achieve this, we will have to collectively shake off deep patterns of subconscious and conscious beliefs and experiences. The frequency of these instances of wrongful deaths and centuries of racially motivated abuses throughout the world creates helplessness in our minds. For all the rhetoric and grandstanding of our politicians and special interest groups, we do not see fundamental change happening. This hopelessness breeds violence, resignation, isolation, paranoia, and of course, more fear. Whatever the current crises happen to be, right now it is COVID-19, racial injustice, political brutality, and street demonstrations, a familiar pattern has been nearly impossible to break. The crisis generates a public outcry. Things go back to normal. The great hope now, however, is that normal will finally be seen for its distorted abnormality. In our view, this abnormality runs deeper than a pandemic or heart-rending injustice and inequality. A much-needed shift cannot take place until humankind passes through an identity crisis. How we see ourselves is presently through a distorted lens, and our illusions extend to the very basis of nature herself. Human activity has despoiled nature without conscience, because humans, at our core, feel that this is our right as the planet's superior life form. The contradiction here is that a truly superior life form would respect all of life, seeing the wonder and fragility of the miracle known as biodiversity. Like many scientific terms, biodiversity sounds abstract and dry. To bring it home and give it vitality, one has to start with a simple fact. Here's the simple fact. Each of us is as biodiverse as the entire planet. Our DNA was built from viral and bacterial DNA. In fact, the coronavirus, by the way, goes back almost 50 million years in evolution. So coming back to where I was, to bring it home and give it vitality, one has to start with a simple fact. Each of us is as biodiverse as the entire planet. Our DNA was built from viral and bacterial DNA, and the constant communication between the genetic material of these microorganisms keeps us dynamically alive, protected from disease, and an intimate part of the chain of life everywhere. Sadly, human activity has threatened biodiversity. And the stress we have placed on microorganisms, even more perhaps than the extinction of species, is coming back to haunt us. The threat of COVID isn't isolated or unique. Nature's most powerful urge is to keep life diverse and flourishing from the fundamental level of fungi, viruses, and bacteria, whose DNA outnumbers ours by a factor measured in millions and billions. So, by a factor measured in millions and billions, if not more. Only in the past 30 years has research into the microbiome, the microbiome, which is the total mass of microorganisms, brought to light how crucial nature's balancing act actually is. Without the bacteria, viruses, and fungus that inhabit our bodies, human life would not be possible. As Earth is a symbiotic collection of diverse species cohabiting to give our planet life, so are we. And as Earth, balance is the key. And as with Earth, balance is the key. The recent science discoveries in the microbiome have been a mind-bending experience, as this once unseen world has come alive under our microscopes through genome sequencing and through advances in computational biology. The notion that human DNA is somehow superior and separate from the DNA of bananas, mice, a cold virus, or mushrooms has toppled. So, your genetic information is not superior to that of the genetic information in other species, including bananas, viruses, or mushrooms. It is humbling to realize that we aren't at the center of life on Earth. We mingle with planetary DNA with every breath, and the jet stream regularly populates the local air with viruses spinning around the globe in a matter of days. The ecosystems around us and within our bodies teem with millions of species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and parasites that vastly outnumber us and, humbling to realize, make us viable. We wouldn't be able to live without them. We are at once a genetic speck in the vast, thriving microcosmos of life, yet also in a position of critical responsibility to help maintain this extraordinary diversity. The human gut microbiome, which is essential for digesting food, contains trillions of bacteria, outnumbering our human cells by more than 10 to 1. And this is not even considering the far more diverse kingdoms of fungi and protozoa within us. Beyond the confines of the gut, each internal organ, from the liver to the breast, kidneys, and even the brain, is now recognized to depend on unique ecosystems of microorganisms that keep our cells healthy. Over 90% of the work done by enzymes in the human body is done by the microbiome. The same non-human life force works with endocrine cells within the gut to produce 90% of serotonin, a neurotransmitter necessary for our much-touted human brain to function. Once you realize that you and the planet's biodiversity are one, nothing less than a shift of identity follows. Microbiome diversity is the foundation for health and longevity, while the destruction of this diversity is the beginning of chronic disease of every variety. The adage could be expanded. To a great aphorism in the Vedantic literature: as is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. As is the human microbiome, so is the planetary microbiome. So as is the outside, so is the inside. The global microbiome functions as a communication network that actually passes electrical information throughout the cellular matrix to coordinate everything life needs to thrive at the cellular level, not simply nutrition and reproduction, but repair and adaptation to changing conditions. Nature, right now, is managing its own identity crisis. Nature's fluent communication network cannot be produced by a single species, but it can be threatened by one. Guess who that is? Homo sapiens, the human species. Nature's fluent communication network cannot be produced by a single species, but it can be threatened by one, us. At the exact moment in history when our existence is being understood as one thread woven in the tapestry of life as a whole, we are tearing the fabric apart, and all life forms will suffer. All life forms will suffer. All existence will suffer. To give one instance, every year over 4 billion pounds of glyphosate, over 4 billion pounds of glyphosate, over 4 billion pounds of glyphosate, the active ingredient in the most commonly used herbicides, is sprayed into our soil, into our water, air, and foods, sterilizing the microbiome and harming the creatures, including us, that the microbiome nourishes. So, my friends, let's not be in denial. Life on Earth is at risk for extinction because of our war against biodiversity. And now, racial strife is part of the war against diversity. The scale of damage is too frightening to contemplate, much less measure. We must transform now. The victims of this war are standing right in front of us. I'll repeat, the victims of this war are standing right in front of us. And they are the soil, the wind, the water, the First Nations, the African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, and the tides of refugees across the world. The world's dispossessed and disenfranchised depend on us to emerge from our false assumed identity of any superiority over and separateness from the whole of life. Reconciliation can begin today. Please train your mind and your eye to seek out and cherish diversity in every element of your life. Breathe. Breathe. The metaphor for today. Breathe. Floyd said, I can't breathe. Today, the whole world is saying, we can't breathe. Breathe and explore a new ecosystem this week. Create and listen to a more diverse community, both within your body and all around you. Plant a seed and a new relationship this week. Get curious and explore what is different from you so that we can quickly discover what we all share. Life everywhere calls out to be saved. Life everywhere calls out to be loved. And if we don't wake up, my friends, if we don't wake up, then we are risking all life on our planet, not just human life, but all life. Existence is more than just your existence or my existence. Existence is life. Existence is the network of genetic information that makes biodiversity possible, that ultimately creates the biosphere. Everything from trees to soil to wind and air, the starscapes of the Milky Way galaxy, the sun, the moon, the ocean tides, they're all part of our existence. And if we don't revere existence today, we never will. And we may go the route of extinction. Nature might say the human species was an interesting experiment, but it didn't work. Let's not make that happen. We are the most awesome experiment, the human species, the most awesome experiment, the collection of the genetic information of the entire planet. And world leaders who don't recognize that, are now in peril. So, since I'm in the mood to quote today from the great wisdom traditions of the world and whatever I've learned, here's something from the great Alan Watts in his book, the book against the taboo, the book on the taboo against knowing who you are. I recommend this book highly. It's called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. And this is a warning right now from a very ancient text to all the tyrant leaders of the world. Not singling out anyone, but all the tyrant leaders of the world. And this is from the Artha Shastra. The Artha Shastra does not forget to warn the tyrant leaders that they can never win. I'm changing a little bit, transcribing this. The Artha Shastra does not forget to warn the tyrant that he can never win. He may rise to eminence through ambition or the call of duty, but the more absolute his power, the more he is hated. And the more he is the prisoner of his own trap. The web catches the spider. He cannot wander at leisure in the streets and parks of his own capital, or sit on a lonely beach listening to the waves and watching the gulls. Through enslaving others, he himself becomes the most miserable of slaves. So, these are today's facts. COVID-19, violence, and identity crisis in America and the world is because we do not know ourselves. Need to know ourselves. Need to know who are you? Who am I? And on a physical level, we are the genetic information of the planet embodied in the evolving microbiome, creating the biodiversity of existence that we call life. But on a deeper level, there is only one being, one consciousness, differentiating into innumerable minds, innumerable emotions, innumerable false identities, innumerable false identities. And these are false identities, these fictional characters are fighting today and risking our extinction. So, world leaders, be aware. Be aware. Another way of saying, beware. Beware. The time is now. The time is at hand. Either we heal or we destroy ourselves. There's no other choice. Who are you? What do you want? What's your calling? What are you grateful for? What are you going to do about it? And when?